Commentator Ann Coulter has caused a firestorm on social media due to a recent appearance she made on Vivek Ramaswamy's Truth podcast, where she said, despite agreeing with Ramaswamy's positions during his presidential run, her hesitance to vote for him had to do with the fact that he is Indian. Watch.
Oh, and I agreed with many, many things you said during, in fact, probably more than most other candidates when you were running for president. But I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian.
Well, now this has caused a firestorm, as I mentioned before. It has caused a debate about the nature of American citizenship. It has caused a debate about if Coulter is a racist or a bigot or not. It's also caused some people to praise Vivek and how he handled the interaction. And it's kind of divided both sides of the aisle on those bases. Did Vivek do good? Did he do bad? What is a citizenship? Is Coulter a racist? None of that matters, by the way. Because this video right here is not going to be about Vivek Ramaswamy or Ann Coulter. This video is going to be about the ideas that are being implicated and talked about in the following interaction that I'm going to analyze. And then it's also going to be about my attempt to refute the ideas put out by Ann Coulter. Because great minds think about ideas. Small minds talk about people. People are simply vessels for ideas, and if you focus on the person, you will miss the significance of what they are saying. So I'm going to analyze the 3 points that Coulter makes throughout the course of her argument. Then I'm going to analyze 2 of Vivek's counterpoints, and then I'm going to address what I think the proper argument against Coulter's points are. So the first point that Coulter makes, she tries to tie American citizenship and the concept of being sort of, I'll say, a true, authentic American to the title WASP, White-Anglo Saxon Protestant. According to Coulter, if you are a White-Anglo Saxon Protestant, this somehow gives you more of an appreciation and a grounding in the American ethos of freedom and the Bill of Rights and independence than if you are an immigrant that comes from a country that may be authoritarian.
There is a core national identity that is the identity of the WASP. And that doesn't mean we can't take anyone else in, a Sri Lankan or a Japanese or an Indian. But the core around which the nation's values are formed is the WASP. We've never had a president who didn't have at least partial English ancestry. Never.
Mm-hmm. Well, first and foremost, the core of American national identity is not the WASP or any other bloodline or any other cultural or ethnic group. It is the individual. It is the individual within the context of a robust system of Enlightenment-era natural law principles that exalt the ability of the human being to be moral and good by recognizing what enables his morality and his goodness, i.e. the concept of having natural rights which allow you to be a good person and prevent you from being a bad person towards your neighbor. America's founding ethos is not the WASP. It's the individual within the context of natural rights, that robust system, within the context of classical republicanism, within the context of popular sovereignty, within the context of the consent of the governed, within a context where both the society and the government exist in separate spheres, and the society has the ability to check the government when it gets a little bit too big for its britches, and community and goodwill are the principles that animate that society. That's the core identity of America. What Coulter is posing is not only not a historically accurate picture of America, which we'll talk about in a second, it's more so a fantasy dreamed up by her, which is completely detached from the truth. So, I think she's making perhaps an egregious error here. It's an error that I think a lot of people make when it comes to the subject of the lineage of America and the heritage of America, especially when it comes to culture and race. So I'll address this point very quickly. There is another variation of this viewpoint that Coulter is expressing that says that America is not an idea, because the founding fathers did not see themselves as sort of disembodied, floating people disconnected from any particular country, but they instead viewed themselves first and foremost as Englishmen, as descendants from the crown. And therefore, you can't say that America was an experiment in terms of ideas and universal principles. America was instead a tradition established by a particular set of Englishmen in the 18th century, which has then translated throughout generations. And in order for America to be full and America to be fully good, it must connect with that tradition of English heritage. And this is kind of what Coulter actually explicitly says towards the end of the interview, where she says she'll be more comfortable if the person running for president has more English blood or British blood in their veins. Well, the problem with this is twofold. Number one, it's a historical error. America, see, when you look at America solely in terms of where the people who settled in this country and created our nation came from, and not in terms of what the conditions of the world they were coming from are, you will miss the significance of America. Because America is not like every other country where a small nomadic group of people came to a land, settled in the land, set up a village, and the village turned into something greater, and so on and so forth. America isn't like that. America marked the transformation between the old world and the new world, and not just geographically, but ideologically. Because the English tradition, up until the point of the 1770s, was entirely focused on a few concepts. The divine right of kings, the sort of absolute primacy of the monarch, so on and so forth, the importance of status to positioning in society. There were philosophers and writers in England that wrote things that displeased the king, wrote things that displeased people who had certain prevailing ideas, who were killed. Algernon and Cindy, one of my favorite philosophers, wrote about the importance of republicanism. He influenced John Locke, but they killed him for not being servile to the old world notion of status and monarchy. Now, the important thing to realize here is that people will then try to respond to you by saying, well, Christian, what about the Magna Carta? Well, Christian, what about the English Bill of Rights? The Magna Carta applied to a specific group of people at a specific time, because those people who had status, the barons, the lords, the rich people, were able to corral the king by mustering up their authority into giving them special privileges. That is not the American conception of freedom, which is based on your internal humanity. That is a status-based conception of freedom. So you have people who think the English tradition is what literally birthed America into existence, when in all reality, it was a rejection of the status of the English tradition and a rediscovery of ancient principles from the Stoics in Rome, out of Germany, out of all these other countries where natural law was being taught, where the importance of reason was being taught, where the Enlightenment was taking place, that all came together to form America. What am I saying? What is you saying, Christian Watson? What I'm saying is America is not solely an English invention. America is the amalgamation of different ideas from different thinkers, from different lands, from different countries, made manifest into a concrete form, which gave us the most radical ode to human freedom and self-reliance and independence known to man. That is America. And if you think you can ignore all of that, you're ignoring history. If you think you can discount all of that, you're discounting history. If you think you can reduce America to bloodlines and oaths and familial traditions, as opposed to the transition between status and contract as detailed by the historian, that erudite historian, Henry Sumner Maine, who quite literally set forth in his book, Ancient Law, how the sort of American form of existence represents this new kind of civilization. If you ignore all this, like Ann Coulter does, then my suggestion to you is that you should either break open a book, abandon your priors, or at least check your priors because they're holding you hostage intellectually, or never open your mouth in good company, because all you will do is deceive people and taint the mind of our country more than it's been tainted at this moment. We are already dealing with propagandists and all kind of other forces that wish to destroy this country. We don't need so-called conservatives not even understanding the foundational origin of our nation. So she's wrong on that. There is no connection between America and a specific bloodline or heritage. Now, I will say this. There's a connection between America and certain religious sentiments. That is absolutely true. In fact, during the founding, the founders understood that the social framework for the society, in absence of a coercive mechanism like the government, because they had this idea of the private and the public, the private sphere being the sphere of the family and the individual, the public sphere being the sphere of government and law. They had this conception that the private sphere would be maintained, and therefore society would be maintained by a Christian ethos. Now, having said that, there are also other religions in America. Look at New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam had over, according to historians, about 3,000 different cultures, religions, people from all around the world, but they all assimilated though. There were Jews, there were everyone. So there were people that weren't just Christian in America, early America, but they reinforced the sort of firmament, the moral firmament that was created by that sort of reliance on some transcendent ethos to maintain the society. So Coulter is just wrong. But it's a wrong that's kind of popular because a lot of people actually buy into that. Let's go into the second part here about the point about royalty that she makes, where she says that the danger is having these immigrants come because immigrants, according to data, according to statistics, actually tend to be less loyal to American ideas.
Framers did think it was so important that you had this deep generation-wide loyalty. And why would they think that? Well, as many said at the time, freedom is a wonderful thing, but it's a very hard thing to learn. And one of the things, and I cite these polls in my book, Adios America, it's striking and depressing that lots of our very best immigrants just do not understand the Second Amendment. They do not get the First Amendment. And you take polls of them, should you have a right to bear arms? Should hate speech be banned? And it's noticeable that large percentages of immigrants and children of immigrants really don't get that. And I think that is the point of having natural born citizen only for president, that this is a really delicate thing we have, this freedom to bear arms and there being no such thing as hate speech. And it's just an additional little safeguard.
So what I think here is actually going on is that Coulter's actually making a point that's important, but she's making it through the wrong way. She's basically talking about the national crisis of the loss of meaning and the loss of Americanism as an idea by virtue of injecting other cultures into our own culture. This is called multiculturalism. Multiculturalism has been a force that has the seeds of its own destruction inherent within its own framework, because multiculturalism quite literally pits cultures against the dominant culture, and then once the dominant culture falls, the multiculturalist have to fight amongst themselves within a certain framework to see who shall be the dominant culture, because there will always be a dominant culture. I don't care what the egalitarians say. There will always be a culture that does something a little bit better than another culture, and by doing that brings rise to their people in some way, shape, or form. This is how human history has been shown to play out, because it's not a matter of historical fact. It's a matter of logical necessity. It's a matter of a logical necessity. So multiculturalism has absolutely been a very damaging force to American society. So I agree with Coulter on that. She's totally right. But you don't address that by, as Vivek pointed out, looking at race. You address that by looking at ideas. Go.
Safeguard.
Here's my question for you on that is, because the left is actually very good at using what I call proxy logic. I reject proxy logic, but the left is actually very good at this. They'll say we need diversity in a corporate institution. So we're going to select for diversity of thought, not by screening candidates for the diversity of their thoughts, but by screening them for the diversity of their skin color, which is a really curious thing. If you care about diversity of thought in a boardroom, why do you care about diversity of shades of melanin or the diversity of your X or Y chromosomes? You could have a room full of people that look really similar to one another and think very differently, or a room full of people that look really different and think the same, which is much of what you get in corporate America today.
Yeah, so this is a very, very odd point for her to make. But now, if I'm going to still man her point, I'll say this. It's important for us to have a confidence that on a group level, the people we're bringing into the country actually understand and know what the country is about. That is 100% important. And she views that, and she views the sort of race or the sort of culture of an immigrant as a means of truly trying to understand if that person appreciates the country that they're in. So I understand where that mentality comes from, but it's an incorrect mentality. Now, it's an incorrect mentality only partially for the reason Vivek Ramaswamy mentioned about it. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy mentioned that it was an argument by proxy. That was one of his counterpoints, that it was an argument by proxy, and that loyalty and citizenship and loyalty have nothing to do with race. Citizenship has more to do with loyalty. Now, the limitations of the proxy argument he made, the limitations are a fewfold. Number one, Vivek Ramaswamy talks about proxy and how the left uses proxy for the cultural agenda. First of all, when you try to phrase the validity or the invalidity of an argument in terms of what a particular power faction does, what you are doing is you are phrasing an argument in the terms of power. So you are entirely trying to make the argument seem as if it is a power struggle, and we should understand it within the context of power. The truth is the truth no matter what group uses it for whatever aims. So I would have not, if I was Vivek, I would have not said, well, the left does it too. No, who cares? Who cares? This is about the truth. That's the podcast, right? It's about the truth. I don't care if the left does it. I don't care if Elmo does it. I don't care if the right does it. I care about what I can verify by virtue of my faculty of reason that is bound up in this cranium that I possess, this bald cranium. That's what I care about. So why talk about the left? Because it's all about, again, appealing to that lizard brain emotional sentiment of tribalism that is bound up in the hearts of so many Americans. We have to rebuke tribalism because tribalism is a part of what Ann Coulter is kind of talking about, because tribalism is what's informing her beliefs. It blunts your mind, it makes you blind to alternative arguments, and it puts you in a place, in a posture where your emotions are ruling you and your reason is defunct. But anyway, the proxy argument only goes so far because Vivek only describes proxy as a symptom of the error Coulter is making, whereas there is a broader context within the error Coulter has made, and that broader context is proximity ethics. This is a concept I have taught on this channel numerous times, and I will continue to teach it. Proximity ethics is when you assess the goodness or the badness of a particular action or person on the basis of what they are close to, not what they're associated with. That'd be go by association. What they are close to, as opposed to what that thing in particular is. So if you see someone next to a car holding gasoline and the car is on fire, you may say, you lit the car on fire. That person could have just been a firefighter that actually was coming to diffuse the fire, and he happened to pick up a can of gasoline that was just stray there on the side of the car. And yet, because you're using proximity ethics, you're indicting the firefighter without actually even knowing what caused the fire in the first place. Do you see? Proximity ethics enables our worst passions to overtake our decision making, and that makes for a terrible world. It makes for a terrible state of thinking, and it also makes for a terrible society. So, proximity ethics is precisely what she's dealing in here. Because Coulter says that WASPs have a racial connection to early America, which I've already explained why all that stuff is not really significant, but going on. And therefore, they're going to have a better appreciation of America on average, or at least it'll make me feel better about what they are for America. Well, what she's doing here is assessing Vivek's validity as a person, and also assessing the validity of all future immigrant candidates as perhaps presidential candidates on the basis of what they are close to, i.e. their ethnicity, as opposed to what they actually are in terms of their own merits, their own ideas, and their own belief systems. Now, it is true that there may be a difference between someone who was raised here their whole life, or someone who was raised here for a generation or so, and someone who just came here yesterday. I get that. But it is still not impossible, nor is it improbable to believe that folks who came here yesterday, who profess Americanism and who seek to understand Americanism, would not one day, if everything else beyond their understanding of Americanism comes together, they could not one day be president. But the proximity ethicist will say you are forever close to your ethnicity, and therefore, no matter what you do or what you believe, you are forever invalid in my eyes to ever occupy the office of presidency. It is an erroneous kind of thinking because it does not consider the matter at hand. It considers a straw man, and it then forms moral conduct on the basis of a straw man. And when moral conduct and straw men meet, what do you get? You get chaos, you get rights violations, you get decadency, the fabric that holds together society, which is sound morality and ethics. Both of those go away because you cannot truly practice those two things in the presence of your proximity bias. Coulter is a victim, or rather, her claims fall victim to the charge of proximity ethics. Last thing, there's also something much deeper here. And this is the tie between substance and aesthetics, substance and style. Coulter quite literally makes it clear that because some people may have English blood or heritage, that style, that aesthetic makes her feel comfortable. But as I mentioned, this says absolutely nothing about the substance of what they are. And if we only assess people on the validity of what they are close to, as opposed to what they have done, their character and what they are, we will never truly be able to understand what they can be or what merits they may have in terms of being the president or indeed not being the president. Coulter views Vivek as a proximity, I think, as a proxy for the broader crisis of immigration and the lack of Americanism that is happening in the country. And you can address those things, by the way. Again, I oppose multiculturalism. I oppose the destruction of American knowledge. I oppose the ignorance that is happening with both native-born Americans, by the way, and non-native-born Americans. Because guess what? If you ask a lot of native-born Americans things about our Constitution, they don't know. Living in a nation does not guarantee you will appreciate or know that nation, which is another error that Coulter commits, because she assumes that people that are naturally born here appreciate this country more and are less susceptible to being pushed around, like she mentioned, when in all reality, Americans have been propagandized for decades by the same government that's supposed to protect us, and the propaganda we've been following for it. Ever since the Office of Wartime Propaganda was established in the 40s, which convinced Americans to rake over their hard-earned dollars and their hard-earned resources to the government so they could wage a war effort halfway across the globe that they convinced people was necessary. And if you didn't partake in that particular effort, you were said that you were riding with Hitler. Remember that advertisement? If you're riding alone, i.e. if you're not carpooling with other people, you're riding with Hitler. So you better carpool, you better sacrifice your property, you better sacrifice everything that you own, or else you're with Hitler. That's what the American government did to people. And yet Coulter wants to talk about, oh, well, those authoritarians, people from authoritarian countries, they actually don't appreciate freedom because they can be more easily bossed around. Really? Have you seen Cubans, Ann Coulter? Have you seen Chinese immigrants that come over here that survived the Cultural Revolution? Have you seen Lily Tang Williams, Z Van Fleet? Are you out of your, let me not curse, are you out of your mind? Well, Christian, those are anecdotes, really? The Cuban community voting almost entirely pro-American for their entire time in this country is not an anecdote. That is an enduring statistical reality which reflects an antipathy towards communism, dictatorship, and an embracement of Americanism. But I digress and keep going on. The true problem with all of this, my friends, has to do with a fundamental ignorance of moral principles, a fundamental ignorance of American history, and a fundamental ignorance of the true cause of the crises happen in our country right now. I think the less interesting angle here is that Ann Coulter is racist. I don't even know if that's true. But what I know is true is that her claims are built upon shoddy foundations that rely on half-baked sentiments and that rely on using erroneous ethical ideas to understand, and then also rely on a false understanding of American history. And the sooner that all of us buttress our ability to deal with these kind of claims without defaulting to some kind of emotionalism, the sooner we'll be able to actually defend America's heritage against her enemies, of which there are many, by the way, and of which those of us who are the part of the patriotic vanguard will be compelled to fight eventually, not violently, but intellectually. Because so far, many of us don't care about the intellectual battle. Many of us care about watching our favorite social media influencer and doom scrolling and putting our head in the sand and saying there's going to be a civil war and our country is doomed, and therefore your mental health goes down. You become a nihilist and you become no good to me as someone that wants to save our country. If you're a nihilist that believes that everything is lost and America is doomed, I have no use for you. Get off my channel. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you unless you're willing to listen. If you're willing to listen, I can reach you. But I have experience because a lot of these nihilists don't want to listen. They want to hear their views parroted back at them. That's another problem we have in this country. A problem of ideological conformity, which brings forth an intellectual mediocrity, which brings forth conversations like this. We've got to stop, my friends. Reject the Ann Coulters of the world in terms of the arguments they make. Reject the bloodline-based notion of Americanism. Reject proximity ethics. Reject anointing style over substance. Embrace logic, embrace first principles, embrace reason, and embrace philosophy. And I promise you, America will be healthier for it. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe. Do whatever you can to get our message out there. This message is dynamite. I think it can help a lot of people. If you enjoy political and social commentary with a hint of philosophy, please, 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 please subscribe, share, comment, tell your friends, tell your family, tell whoever you can. We have to make this work because this society and this culture needs fruit. It needs water because right now the soil is arid. The crops are dying. Our hopes are down. And I believe this message is 100% the antidote. So please share it, my friends, if you've been blessed by this. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted. Don't listen to Ann Coulter. And please, stay pensive. Bye, guys.